Hello everyone, and thank you for listening to Fragile Gnome. If this is your first time listening, thank you for checking us out, and I hope you like most of what you hear. Fragile Gnome is a show that discusses everything that is taboo that we all think about and talk about with our close friends and family, but aren't quite comfortable with sharing with the rest of the world or people outside of our close circle. You know those good conversations that you have when everyone is open-minded, relaxed, and comfortable? Those are the things that we discuss, such as life experiences on everything paranormal, spiritual, religious, and the occult, culture taboos, mysteries, and the unexplained. We also have paranormal stories bi-monthly and sometimes weekly. We will be having weekly stories for the month of October. We will have interviews with people that share their experiences and opinions on the topics that I just listed. Some will be experts, others not so much. But everyone has a voice. The name Fragile Gnome comes from the understanding that gnomes are fragile because of their size and vulnerability. And even though they are really cool mystical creatures and a great representation and mascot for the show, the word gnome also means knowledge. So when you put them together, it means fragile knowledge. Our knowledge is fragile. And one of the main reasons that it is fragile is because so much of our knowledge is taught and not learned through actual experiences. How many beliefs or opinions do we really have based on what we know and think versus what we have been taught and programmed by our culture? Think about it. We hope you enjoy the show, and if you do, please like and subscribe and join us for future conversations and stories. It was Saturday in the middle of August in South Texas. We had a funeral that was scheduled for that morning. I was finishing up preparations on another body during the service and trying to finish before the funeral ended. The funeral service was nearing the end. In the embalming room we had a speaker that we could listen to. It allowed us to hear the funeral services going on in the chapel. I cleaned up and went outside to turn on the Cadillac, so it would be nice and cool for Father Trevor on our way to the graveside service. I was in charge of driving the lead car. The lead car is what guides the funeral procession, followed by the hearse, and then the family car. The priest or pastor, in this case it was Father Trevor, ride in the lead car on the way to the cemetery to conclude the burial service. After the graveside service was complete, which today was quicker than usual due to the fact that it was almost 100 degrees and everyone was in suits and formal clothes. Nevertheless, people were still hanging around, like they often do, talking and catching up with each other before they made plans to gather at another location. Now, for a lot of people, a funeral is much like a family reunion. Family reunions don't happen as often as they should, so people take advantage of everyone being together for the first time in a long time to catch up on each other's lives. I was standing under a tree getting some shade from the hot summer sun when Father Trevor came over to ask me if I could take him back to the funeral home. He had another service scheduled for later that afternoon and needed to get back and eat and prepare for the next service. He was a young priest, not much more than 30. He had only been an official priest for about 5 years. He was well-traveled and had been in the Vatican several times, and he was a master at his craft, having much knowledge and devotion in his training and theology. He was a tall, blonde-haired, white gentleman, and he spoke 3 different languages, and he was fluent in all of them. He would often do services in English and Spanish for bilingual families. Not a lot of people realize it, but priests are very personable people and love having conversations and getting to know the people that they meet. You can pretty much talk about anything and everything with a priest. That's what they do. It's the role they play in the community, and it's one of the many hats that they wear. We had 2 other funeral directors there, so I got the go-ahead to take Father Trevor back to the funeral home. We got in the car, which I had left running during the service so it would stay nice and cool. I reached back and grabbed him a water and handed it to him. "Thanks," he said. "I definitely needed that." We started conversating with small talk and current events. I had met him on several other occasions before this, and we had a casual friendship. He asked, "Are people afraid to shake your hand because you're a mortician?" I laughed. Actually, that happens a lot. People have superstitions, and a lot of them get spooked at the idea of shaking a mortician's hand. They feel like they are shaking hands with death." He chuckled. "I could see that. People get weird around priests as well. They think that I carry judgment and that I actually know their sins. It's funny the paradigms we sometimes believe." I often wonder, because of being around death and the funeral home, do you have any good scary stories from being a funeral director? I smiled and put the car in drive. "I have a couple stories, but I bet you have some good ones as well. I know spiritual warfare is a real thing, and let's face it, Catholic churches can be kind of creepy. You have had to have seen or felt something weird." Actually, I do have one experience that stands out more than the rest. Do you want to hear it? You have my attention. We got some time before we get back, so let's hear it. I had been at the parish for about 8 months, he said. I had gotten back from Europe. There was a young lady that came in a few times wanting us to help her. She was around 23. She told us that she thought she was being attacked by a demon and that it was terrorizing her, and the house that she lived in was haunted. She had been involved in prostitution and drugs and was borderline schizophrenic, in my opinion. He sighed. There seems to be a lot of that in the big city. Anyways, we counseled her for a few weeks and came to the conclusion that she was not experiencing anything supernatural or demonic. I interrupted. "When you say we, who do you mean?" "Oh, I'm sorry, myself and Father Thomas." Now, I had met Father Thomas a few times. We had done some funeral services for some families that had passed away in his congregation. He was an older gentleman in his late 50s, but still very active, and he had been a priest for over 25 years. Father Trevor continued. "She definitely had some unresolved issues that she was going through, and we recommended her to get therapy from a clinical psychologist, and we would continue to meet with her if she agreed to meet with a psychologist. She agreed, and then we didn't hear from her for quite some time. 2 weeks later, myself and Father Thomas went to the church to open and get ready for morning mass. We arrived early in the morning, before the sun came up, like we always do. When we arrived, I told Father Thomas something seems off. We noticed that some things were out of place, and it looked as if someone had been there overnight. We started our way back to the office, walking through the chapel. Our offices are located behind the chapel. When we got to the office doors, we noticed it was open and someone was sitting on the couch with the lights off. I flipped the switch on, and lo and behold, there was the young woman that I had been meeting with. She was sitting on the couch with her clothes torn and half naked. Her hair was down in her face. We couldn't see if she was awake or not. She was sitting upright with her head looking at the ground. I called out to her, "What are you doing? Is everything okay? Are you hurt? Do you need help? What is wrong?" She said something, but it wasn't clear. "What did you say? I can't understand you." She got louder and louder, saying the same thing over and over again, humming what sounded like an old tune you would hear on a record or recording. "Do you need us to call an ambulance? What's wrong? Did someone hurt you?" She tilted her head up slowly, using one hand to pull her hair out of her face.
"What can you do, priests?"
in a deep, demonic voice. I was startled. She didn't sound like the same person I had talked to.
"She thinks you can help, but we know you can't. You're just a child acting like a man. She is already mine. I can do with her whatever I want."
Knowing that she was trying to convince me that she had a demon just weeks before, I decided to speak to her in Spanish, knowing she didn't speak Spanish. I thought, this will make her feel foolish and put an end to this whole act. She responded, this time in Spanish.
"You're trying to be clever, aren't you, boy?"
At that moment, I was gripped with fear. I felt like this was a possession, and I had gotten it all wrong. The energy in the atmosphere instantly changed. I looked at Father Thomas and could tell he was thinking the same thing. Father Thomas said, "Get the book." I turned and walked over to the shelf behind the desk. As I did, she sat there with a crooked smile and her head tilted to the side, watching my every move. I reached for the drawer, hands shaking, and I pulled the book out and handed it to Father Thomas. I then started walking back to her, praying for her out loud and holding my rosary. Father Thomas put on his glasses that were resting in his coat pocket, opened the book, licked his fingers, and started turning through the pages of the book. He was looking for the part that was used in ritual exorcism. Not being prepared and nervous, I could see the anxiety on his face. He was looking for the imperative formula. This is a series of prayers used by the priest to banish evil spirits that might be controlling or trying to take over a person. He turned and turned. When he got to where the page was supposed to be, he saw that the pages were torn out. He then tilted the book in my direction to show me. I backed up and leaned over to see what he was trying to show me. The pages were in fact missing and torn out. At that moment, the drawer I had opened to get the book from slammed shut. The loud slamming noise of the drawer startled us both and broke our attention. At that moment, the woman started laughing.
Are you looking for this?
She held up her hand to reveal that she was holding the missing pages.
You are nothing without your precious books and rituals. You are not real priests. You are men with a lost faith. You can do nothing for her.
She then stood up.
Let's see how much you believe in your God.
She started towards us, twitching her body as she walked, then throwing herself at us, knocking the book out of Father Thomas's hand. I reached out and grabbed one arm, and then the other, and held them behind her back. She started flailing around wildly and screaming. You could hear two voices coming out of her mouth when she yelled. One was hers and the other sounded like a monster. Father Thomas pressed the rosary off on her forehead that he had taken off his neck and started praying. When he did, you could smell what smelled like rotten meat all around us. The woman started shaking and screaming. I heard laughter and I heard begging at the same time. We got her to the floor and started reciting the Lord's Prayer. At that time, the janitor that had come in, we didn't even know he was there, started yelling, "What the hell is going on? What's wrong with her? Help us hold her down. She's going to hurt herself, or maybe one of us." He yelled, "I'm going to call 911. He dialed 911 and said that we needed medical attention and police assistance. He then got off the phone and helped hold her down. She had the strength of several men and we could barely contain her. Father Thomas saw the pages in her hand and grabbed them from her clenched fist. He then spread them out on the desk and started reading them out loud. She struggled and fought us the entire time. Then suddenly, she just stopped as the last prayer was being read by Father Thomas. "Is this possible?" I said out loud. The woman started crying and sobbing. "Please help me. It's not gone." We set her up and put the rosary around her neck and then laid her back down. "I don't think it's over." He looked at me, his glasses falling off his face. "I don't think it is either, but it has subsided for now." She then let out a loud exhale and then passed out. The paramedics came in and we quickly got out of the way. Father Thomas was relieved that we were not the only people in the room, and quite frankly, so was I and the janitor. They started checking her and doing their medical routine. She was unconscious and non-responsive, but her vitals were stable. They loaded her on the gurney and picked it up and started their way to the ambulance. At that time, the other police arrived and started getting all the details on what happened. A few police, after hearing what had happened, couldn't believe what they were hearing, and were admittedly creeped out by the whole thing. One of the police officers was a member of the parish and had gone to the church and known the girl. He told us that she had been missing for a few days, and her family was looking for her. Once the other police officers left, with the paramedics, Officer Hernandez, the one that knew her, hung back so that we could talk with him in private. "Father Trevor, Did the woman say anything about her dad? No, she never mentioned anything about her dad. I've only met with her a few times before today, but no, she never mentioned him. Well, her dad committed suicide 4 days ago. You can't be serious. I'm afraid I am. And in his suicide note, he confessed to raping and beating her. To our knowledge, she doesn't know about her father's death yet. Surprised and shaken up by the news, I just shook my head and said, I don't understand. Officer Hernandez then said, That's not all, Father. In the note, he said he was being told by voices to kill his family and that he was no longer himself. He also wrote that a demon had taken over him, causing him to rape his only daughter. He feared that he was going to kill his family, and since he couldn't even stop himself from raping his daughter, he decided the best option was to end his life. He signed the suicide note with a different name. He did? What name did he sign? I'm sorry, Father. I don't know how to pronounce the name. The letter was written in a different language. Well, how do you know it was him that signed it? Or even that it was him that wrote the note? That's the crazy part, Father. He recorded his suicide on the family video camera. You can see him writing the letter just before he took it. I want to thank you for taking the time and listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you like the story, please hit the like button and subscribe so that you can get the latest shows from Fragile Gnome. If you have a story that you would like to share, please let me know in the comments, or you can send me an email to the address listed in the description box. Again, thank you for watching this show, and I hope you enjoy future episodes to come.